My presentation is in relation to a study that I am leading with my team. We looked at suicide bereavement in the armed forces community. So there might be some people here. Oh, by the way, hello everybody online. Some of my favourite people are on there. So hello. I might forget the rest of the presentation, so hello. So you might be questioning why Suicide Bereavement UK or myself are leading an armed forces suicide bereavement study, and I'm going to tell you why. I absolutely understand. I was wife of 24548551. I was an army wife for 8 years, personally bereaved by suicide when we were posted in Catterick. Now you'll see the highlight in green. I want you to be mindful of that because you're going to see it peppered throughout this presentation. So I lost my civilian brother. By chance, my other brother from a big family was aged 19, based in Catterick, and he'd just finished his basic training and was learning a trade. You've got a picture of me and my ex-husband. I loved army life, but not so keen on the husband in the end. So that's a bit naughty, but it's the truth. So it's all about telling the truth. So I've made that transition alone with 3 children. 7, 4, and 9 months. I didn't know, because a lot of people say, oh, I'm only an army wife, or I'm only a wife. No, we're not only wives. We play a very important role for morale. That when I came back civilian life, they're not as friendly, and they don't speak to you and things. And I felt, that's how it felt, and that's what it feels like when people come out of the armed forces. As a direct result of losing my loss, like Anna, some of us, we're not well for a period of time, but the strong ones, we brush ourselves down. I educated myself. I had no qualifications whatsoever, degree, PhD, and specialised in suicide bereavement research for over 20 years. So in relation to Suicide Bereavement UK, we're recognised internationally as an award-winning organisation. We specialise in suicide bereavement research, training and consultancy. I was involved in the development of Help Is at Hand. Put your hands up who knows of Help Is at Hand. Right, we really need everyone to put their hands up on that, so you need to have a look at that. This has been designed, credit to Public Health England, and I think they've called it one of the first. They took a risk. They commissioned people bereaved by suicide to draft a document, Help Is at Hand, for people that are going to be bereaved by suicide in the future and don't even know it. And it kind of makes sense, but it's about thinking out of the box and doing things a bit differently. So I've led the National Suicide Bereavement Survey. We've got Isabel here that was on the team. So let me tell you, we had about 1,500 job titles. We started learning then. The armed forces serving personnel want a voice, because if you're interested, have a look on that guide. We list all the professions and occupations, and they're in there, Army, Navy and RAF. So we host the largest suicide bereavement conference internationally, and you're witness to it. And most of my work that I've done in the 20 years is funded by government, and I was funded by the National Institute for Health and Research to develop and deliver PABS evidence-based suicide bereavement training for professionals. This is first of its kind internationally. I'd say, I'm joking, we're a bit like Star Trek. We do, you'll see all these, they're all first. And this is because, like Madeline was saying, because it's a new field, somebody has to go first. And going first, doing things, is difficult and rewarding, but somebody has to do it. So that's kind of, I think, that's how I see. Am I echoing? Because I am here. No, all right, okay. You can't, right, I can shout when I'm loud. So actually, ultimately, I understand this way of life. And actually, I think, even though I got divorced, I'm part of this armed forces community. I'm bereaved by suicide. And it is those things that matter to me. Pardon? What, sorry? Well, I don't know what's happening with the microphone here. Oh, this is everyone's nightmare. Do I take this one off? This is your nightmare. Right, okay. So ultimately, I've got the skill set and the compassion to translate research findings into evidence-based resources. Can you hear me in the back? Right, okay. So, why do we need an armed forces suicide bereavement pack? The economic cost of each suicide in the UK is £1.6 million. 60% of this is attributed to those bereaved by suicide. But I'm going to challenge that top bullet point. It was calculated on between 6 and 10 people affected by each suicide. But the reality is, a year later, Julie Sorrell, MIF's colleague, we now know it's 135 people that's affected by suicide. So if you're shocked by the 1.6 million, think again, it's a lot more. And, so anyone correct me if I'm wrong, has the armed forces worked out the economic cost of a suicide? Because I think that, it's not the same as the general population. We know those bereaved by suicide are significantly at risk of dying by suicide. And then we've got the NHS suicide prevention strategy. And I would say, what's in a word? Absolutely everything. So in 2012, for the first time, government have acknowledged we need to be looked after the bereaved, but equally the people that look after us. And it's absolutely essential. Two sides to a coin. We all matter. We all move forward together. I don't know if you can see this table. I've tried to take it off a report. So this is suicide in the serving community. So over 20 years, there's 287 suicides in 20 years. I thought it might have been a lot more. I was quite surprised at the low number. So they potentially have a low suicide rate. It's lower than the general It's been lower than the general population for over 35 years. However, since 2017, the number of army male suicides have increased. The risk of suicide amongst men in the army is the same as the general population for the first time since the mid-1990s. And so in relation to the army, that's the most vulnerable force. Suicide rates amongst men aged between 20 and 24 years is significantly higher than the UK general population. So we have to do something, and we know it's the younger ones, and we know it's the army. Now, I want to refer to the table there, the top one in relation to suicide. So 93% are men. In civilian life or the general population, it's 75%, but you would expect it to be like that because it's a male-dominated profession. Suicide in females is relatively rare. So now let's look at the suicide in the veteran community. And where are you, Catherine? Catherine Rodway, where are you? She's at the back. So if you're interested in the veteran community, you need to speak to Catherine. This is her study. So the other one was 20 years in the serving. This is 22 years, and it's a retrospective study, which means we look backwards at those suicides around that time. 1,086 veteran suicides, male 96%, female 4%. So again, it reflects the 96% in the serving, it's 93%, so it's similar. So look at that now, the army, again, 74%. So fair to say we need to target that particular force more than the others. So suicide risk was 2 to 4 times higher in male and female veterans aged under 25 years than the same age groups in the general population. So alarm bells ringing potentially. The suicide rate in veterans is not greater than the general population, which I thought it might have been until I started working in this area. So in relation to veterans at risk, being male, discharged from the UK Armed Forces between the ages of 16 and 34, untrained, no skills when discharged, receiving an administrative, disciplinary or medically discharged, those who have served in the army and leave on a non-voluntary basis, and younger veterans with less than 10 years service. So these two studies are so important because we know we have a rough idea where we need to target. So we started this study about 16 months ago, but it was over 2 years, 2.5 years before we actually, from the concept. So during this time, recently, the UK Armed Forces have developed a suicide prevention strategy for serving personnel. There are 8 key areas that they're going to focus on, and they're answerable and report back within next year, within 12 months. 1. Understand high-risk groups within the armed forces. 2. Educate the armed forces about suicide. 3. Enable individual resilience and personal support needs. Enable safe military environments. Enhance organisational management of those at risk. Enable access to support for those at risk. Develop accessible post-pension support. And improve organisational learning. So then I looked to see what there is for veterans. So we know veterans have the same suicide rate as a general population, but whether we like it or not, they are a subgroup or a population that are different and will have different needs. And so Help the Heroes, I found them, they're currently doing a campaign asking for suicide prevention policy for veterans. And they recommend that the UK government and devolved nations make it mandatory for local authorities to identify veterans as a high-risk group when developing local suicide action plans, clear signposting, and those who support veterans attend Zero Suicide veteran suicide awareness training. So, in relation to the armed forces community, and I want to keep saying community because it's simple to have serving veterans and families, but reality is, if it's a community, and what I've learned is it's like that. And I know there's legal responsibilities, but this sense of community is important. So, civilians. So, before someone... well, it's like gravity, I would say. What goes up comes down. Equally, those that sign up and go in come out at some point, and they're a veteran longer than they're serving. So prior to joining, they're our people. In relation to the armed forces, people that have no concept of this think they just go to war. The reality is they step up when we as society need them. For example, when there's floods, when there's strikes, the emergency services, COVID, they build structures, they give the injections. There still are people, and when they come out, they come back to us. And if I'm totally honest, I think we fail them because they feel misunderstood, and often they are. I think we need to step up, and it's not just about health, it's about everything else. So I think maybe if some of you can reflect on that. So in relation to suicide in the armed forces, this is absolutely not a criticism. I've worked in this field for over 20 years. There was nothing in civilian life. But in relation to suicide, it's possible to argue that the most attention was focused on suicide and self-harm. But I mentioned to you before the number of people that are affected by suicide. I'm going to state the obvious now. Those bereaved always outnumber those that die. But we know where they are. So we need to look at these people in the armed forces community, what they need. So in relation to the Armed Forces Covenant, aims to remove disadvantage and ensure that the armed forces community, and I want to keep saying community because I think of it as one. If that's naive, I make no apology, because I think a lot of the people from here feel that, including the families, receive the same support as a civilian community. Now, I was involved in this. This was written by bereaved people for civilian people, fit for purpose for civilians. So, if we're looking at the Armed Forces Covenant, surely they've got the right to have something that is fit for purpose for them. You've got serving, you've got veterans, and you've got families. So just bear that in mind for now. So I've got to say, this, when you do something that's new and different, and the fact it's suicide, because it makes a lot of people nervous, you know, it can cause a lot of tension and difficulties, but I want to highlight the partnership approach here. It was funded and approved by NHS England. It was also approved by the Ministry of Defence, and ethical approval was obtained to conduct the study. So this is quite special. This is the first time ever in the UK that we've interviewed serving personnel bereaved by suicide. But what's special about this is that I'm truly independent. I feel part of the armed forces community. I'm bereaved by suicide. I have the skills to do this. So it's a bit like Public Health England. They're taking a risk on it, a calculated risk. But what they did, which was special as well, they left me to it. And what I would argue is these people engage with me like no other, probably. Some are frightened to engage with the MOD because they worry about the career. Some people don't engage, sort of veterans won't engage with the NHS. So actually, I'm truly independent. But what was really important, that I was supported, my team was supported. So where are you, Andy? So Andy Baker, he's really helped with this. So we represented NHS England, and then Helen Halliwell, it's a bit of a tongue twister, Helen Halliwell, she allocated me a person that supported me. So it was a real working, positive relationship from the onset. So this is the research team, so I'm leading it. We've got Dr. Pauline Nelson, who's online, and then we've got Angela at the front. Oh, where are you, Liz? So Angela and Liz. So three out of the 4 are Winston Churchill Fellows. So this is the aim of the study: identify experiences, needs of individuals bereaved by the suicide of a family member, colleague, ex-colleague or friend during or after the person's military service. And then we're going to co-produce an evidence-informed suicide bereavement pack to support these groups and complement existing guidance. So this is in simple terms, 3 phases: identify relevant resources nationally and internationally, interview people, because suicide is complex and difficult. Sometimes we think we have to have a complex solution. Actually, I would say sometimes, just the solution is in the problem. Ask people and they'll tell you. It's as simple as that. Based on phase 1 and 2, we developed an armed forces pack. So I conducted in-depth qualitative interviews who were serving or veterans to suicide, and explore their experiences and needs. So this is who we interviewed: serving personnel, ex-service and families. So what I want to share with you now is, before I tell you who's took part, I think it's important to know who died. So 30 people, there's a small scale study because it's a qualitative study, it's about in-depth. 19 people had died. 13 were serving, 6 were ex-service, 15 were male, 4 were female, all were white. And I'm deliberately being ambiguous here. You wouldn't do this on an academic kind of presentation. The age of the deceased ranged from teens to middle age. I'm deliberately ambiguous because to protect these people. Married, single, recently separated. You'll be reading through the list as I go. 2 were female and from the LGBT community. Several were parents. 1 potentially part of a cluster. So there's the years of the death, 2007 to 22. Similar to the general so the method was similar to the general population. I don't like to talk about method, but I think it's important on this one. Similar, except firearms, access to means. So these people died whilst deployed in the war zone. So they died where they lived, public place, on leave, whilst deployed, served with the so we've captured each force. So 30 people aged between 19 and 63 at the time of the loss. 13 were serving, 8 were ex-service, 9 were family members, 29 was white and 1 was dual heritage. So those that took part in relation to serving personnel, there's major limitations to this, but you know what? It's just shining a light on this and we'll work with it. 12 were white, dual heritage, all were male, aged between 20 and 50. We've got all forces represented, the lowest to the very senior commissioned officers. Several had lost more than 1 serving personnel, ranging between 1 and 4. So here's the list. I'll let you, because I'm going to have to go quickly. So these are all the people that we've lost, but notice the green highlights again. If you're going to develop anything, you need to be mindful of these, because whether we like it or not, or we think they're not part of the community, people in the armed forces community will be bereaved by suicide and at risk of dying by suicide. Veterans, again, all white, aged between 40 and 60, all forces represented, varied ranks, several had lost veterans and serving. So here you've got veterans losing serving personnel, veterans losing husbands, ex-husbands, and the list goes on, and again, civilian family members. So this is in relation to the families, the people that have lost serving, lost husbands and sons, the civilian family members, lost mothers, daughters, brothers, father-in-law. And it goes on, similar throughout. So what I would argue, there's a complex web of relationships that you can maybe separate them, but it's not that simple. It's, it all goes together. So findings, examples of the insight: suicide whilst deployed in a war zone, repatriation of service personnel who have died by suicide, that was matched, experience of finding the person in the home, public place, being informed by civilian, military police, 2 participants from the same regiment have lost several, serving veterans supporting each other. So whilst we think they're separate, they get to each other, this community. They care about people. It doesn't matter which camp they're in, serving or veteran, they get to each other. And at the bottom, impact on children. Anna has demonstrated why we need to look at them. So here are the findings. We'll understand what's required in a suicide bereavement pack and why. The information to inform the Armed Forces suicide prevention strategy. We've identified good and bad practice with the serving and veterans. How these people would like to be cared for, and the experience of those that come into contact with us, which is really important. So there we are. Our pack is 3 guides. This is what we initially drafted. We did 3 guides, but what we've done is also taken into account civilian family members. The tone of each guide needs to be pitched slightly different. Many of those that leave the armed forces don't consider themselves to be even a veteran. If they leave, say, at 24 and get a new career, they don't get that. So we needed an alternative word. So we used throughout ex-service personnel, because it's clear you're either serving or ex-service. And they've been designed in a way that you can dip in and dip out. So I'm running out of time, so I'm really sorry about this. Are you okay? Okay, so we know they need it. Government knows they need it. The MOD do. But, let's ask the people. So this is serving personnel who lost a serving family member to suicide. And he's talking about taking part in the study. Being bereaved by suicide is a tough subject, but at the same time, I'm not going to shy away from it. If talking about my loss helps others and makes it easier, or makes sure that others can get access or know where to go, then some good can come out of it. So we had 6 themes. I'm not going to read the quotes. Suicide and its impact. Let me tell you, this is so taboo, but these people want to know. The lot that I've interviewed have been suicidal, are feeling suicidal, and they told me, tell us, because we need to know, and tell us where we need to go. And so this is really important. Now, that isn't in Help Is at Hand like it is in what we've developed. Grief responses, I love this one. You're going to feel like a bag of shit, and that's normal, that's okay. And they go on. So you can see, I heard some of you laughing because it is funny. Actually, it's talking to their own people. So we've got coping strategies. My advice would be, don't be afraid if you've got mental health issues. Don't be afraid. You need to speak to someone. Again, it goes on, guiding them throughout. And then we've got children. So people need to know where to go for what. Now, I would say this, I want to refer to this quote. If you always do what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always got. And so we think out the box, we're doing something different. These are being designed, by the way, I'm just giving you a flavour of what they are. So we designed or prepared 3 guides. So these are just a rough draft, but gives you an idea. Been informed by lived experience. They're called At Your Side. There's a series of them, and they're designed for the Armed Forces community. Helps address the Armed Forces Suicide Prevention Strategy, Armed Forces Covenant, NHS England Suicide Prevention Strategy. 6 sections in each guide: suicide and its impact, grief responses, coping strategies, practical matters, talking to children because they're invisible. No longer should they be. I'm not saying in the armed forces generally, as Anna's demonstrated. Useful contacts and resources fit for purpose for the armed forces community. So I want to share this. There's some people in the audience that have given me photographs. The armed forces community have engaged with us. They've took part shared stuff they've never talked about. So we've got brilliant quotes that speak to the audience. But you know, more than that, this armed forces community have stepped up. Not only they took part to help others, they've given me pictures. Because let me tell you, and I'm talking from personal experience here, when you're bereaved by suicide, you feel you've got 3 heads and you're an alien. So it's very reassuring to see these have all got 1 head. But it's so powerful. So I would argue the Armed Forces guides acknowledge, reassure, inform, guide, signpost, empower, generate hope, and have the potential to save lives. This is where we're at the moment. So guide 1, we've drafted all guides, and then they've been reviewed by our expert group and lived experience group, shared with the funders and MOD, been reviewed by both. We're currently designing Guide 2 and Guide 3, and it's going through a process and will be launched in 2023. So what next? We're going to launch the guides, which are signed off, and that will be later this year. Findings will inform the Armed Forces strategy. We'll publish findings in peer-reviewed journals, and we'll also be launching Armed Forces, Emergency Services, evidence-based training. So, before I thank you, and I'm really sorry I've gone over, I want to start with a quote. The scars you share become lighthouses for people who are headed for the same rocks you hit. I want to thank NHS for funding the study, MOD for ethical approval and permitting my team to interview serving personnel. But more importantly, the Armed Forces community. If you get them on board, you can move mountains. They've supported us from the onset. They've helped us recruit. They've participated. Joanne, where are you from Grassroots? Oh, you little darling. It's really struggled with women. I couldn't get any female photographs, so Joanna's found me loads of female photographs because a lot of women serving and veterans say they feel invisible. Well, they're not in these guides. And they've been reviewed by people in the audience. So ultimately, I would say, when you get all that together, that's when we make a difference. Thank you.